Hey guys, welcome back. It's time for another quick tech. If you work on enough pedals and guitars and stuff, you'll know that this is actually a surprisingly common problem. I'm actually working on a pedal right now and the original knobs are being replaced with these guys, and unfortunately the shaft on the pot has actually been cut just a little bit too long, and it means the pot knob is going to sit up quite a bit above the pedal, and it just looks kind of naff. These knobs actually have a little recess that would normally go over the nut on the pot, and it should sit almost flush. It's a pretty common problem with guitars as well. You see it all the time, where the knobs really don't sit flush with the instrument, and it just doesn't look 100%. So I'm going to show you what I do about that. So obviously what I want to do is just remove 2, maybe 3 millimeters from the top of this shaft. You can do that by filing or possibly cutting a thin sliver off with a hacksaw. If you've got a belt sander, you can just touch it against the grit and it's a job done in just a minute or less. I don't have a belt sander though, and the problem with trying to file it as is that you can't really get it into a vise. You can't really hold the shaft sort of in a vise properly, and you certainly can't put the body of the pot in a vise, because once you tighten that up it'll just crack and break the pot itself, and besides it'll still be spinning. So in the past I've just sort of grabbed the pot shaft with pliers, and that will kind of work, and then just you can work it back like that. The trouble with that is that it doesn't really grip it sort of very well. And if you're doing it with a splined shaft like this, firstly, you don't want to grab it parallel with the split. You want to make sure you're grabbing it across the split like that. And the pliers actually will grab those shafts, those splines pretty well. But the trouble with this is that the pliers will actually mar up the splines and potentially even crush the splines. And then when you go to push the knob on, it's usually a very tight fit. And even worse, later down the track, you might try to pull the knob off. And I've seen a lot of guitars over the years where this whole shaft has actually been pulled right out of the pot, and the pot's just ruined. There is a better way though. So this is my go-to jig for this job. I've already got one made for 1/4" shafts, so I'm going to make one for 6mm spline shafts, and I just start with a piece of scrap timber. It's got some black paint on it and a hole in one end, but that doesn't matter. What does matter though is its thickness. This is 6mm thick, and it has to be a little bit wider than your pot casing. So for these 16mm pots, this is about 21mm. And I'm going to start by drawing a center line, and then I'm going to check that off about 16mm from one end. I'm just clamping that to another piece of scrap timber so I don't blow the chips out from the other side when the drill goes through. I'll eyeball it as square as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. So now I'll just cut down that center line. To about there. Now obviously the grain has to run lengthways in this for this to work, but there is a chance that in use and over time that the timber will split right down the middle here, so it needs to be reinforced across the grain. You could use just another piece of scrap timber, glue it like that, but I actually have a piece of Queensland maple veneer here, so I'm going to use that on both sides. So when it comes to using these jigs with the 1/4" one, you want to make sure the flat and the shaft comes in at right angles to the split in the jig, and just make sure the pot's out of the way of either side. And it's kind of the same deal with the 6mm spline split shaft. You want to make sure the split goes side to side so that it ends up being at right angles to the split in the jig. And you can just push that in. Again, make sure the pot's out of the way, and then you can put that in your vise. Yeah, it's a good idea to measure first. get an idea of how much you have to take off. And then of course you can file that or you can cut a small sliver off with your hacksaw. So this is the right length now, but it's got a sharp edge on it, of course, which will make it difficult to get the splined knob on. But it's very easy to deburr. I normally just use sandpaper, and you can just go around like that. So if you want to take your lutherie or your tech work to that next level, then taking care of all those little details like getting the knobs to sit just right is really important. If you ever take your guitars or your homemade pedals to a trade show or something, I can tell you now that's exactly what everyone will be looking out for, especially people in the industry. I know these are very simple jigs, but I really do use them quite frequently. The only thing I would say is that if you make one nice and wide like this for a 25mm pot, then I've also made this about an inch or so longer, and that's so I can take this split a good inch or so longer as well. So that's because the arms are quite a bit thicker, and that extra length means they'll be flexible enough for the jig to work. If you are into guitar pedals and guitars and all that, then do consider subscribing to the channel. I really do appreciate it. Also give us a thumbs up and hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.